Hello, good morning, Full Circle Wellness community and friends. Happy Friday. I am coming to you a little late this week. As before, I kind of came in on Tuesday or Wednesday, but this week, I was off yesterday and I'm off today and I'm off through Christmas. So I just have all kinds of things going on, and I'm just now sitting down so that we can have our big sort of studio talk on faith and spirituality, which was the theme and topic this week. Ella just arrived, so if you hear her or see her, she's with us. She's here. Okay. I have a few things with me today. I have notes because I actually have some quotes and things like that I wanted to share with you guys, which of course I had to write down because there's no way I was going to remember them. I have my Universe Has Your Back card deck from Gabby Bernstein. We're going to pull a card later, so that's a little addition that I wanted to bring today. And then at the request of one of our members and also like one of my besties, today's stuffy is Yita the Yeti. She's a squishmallow, which I just discovered recently is this big stuffed animal brand that I was not familiar with. She has little shiny Yeti horns and a little curly hair, and she's smiling at you. And she's a little deflated because she's so large, as you can see. I actually use this as a pillow. Like, this became my pillow. I was using this like really nice side sleeper pillow, but it was actually giving me a lot of neck pain, and I still have it, and sometimes I'll use it just depending on how I feel and what's going on. But then I started sleeping with this as a pillow. So our stuffy today is Yita the Yeti. And I have a quick story about how I got Yita. And her name wasn't Yita. I renamed her. I was having a whole day. I was so anxious, really filled up with my emotions. I was like, just having like a rough afternoon. And I really needed to still like run errands after work. I needed to go to Costco and Kroger and like do the groceries and get some gas and like do all of this stuff. And it was just very overwhelming. So Ella just started chewing the bone. I apologize. If I try to kick her out, she's gonna be upset with me, so we'll just leave her and I'll just talk over her and it's fine. That day I went to Costco and I'm just, walking straight back. I have like a path that I take, right, when I'm in Costco or when I'm in Kroger, and there was this giant bin of these, and this was not the only one. There was like, other kinds, and I was like, oh, those are pretty. I was like, ooh, and I just like reached and I was like, oh my God, those are soft. And it calmed my nervous system so much that I was like, oh my God, I have to get one of these. And you guys, okay, so we're talking about faith and spirituality. I'm definitely your woo-woo best friend. I'm here for the woo-woo stuff. So a while back, I sort of just put out into the universe that I wanted my like sign. Like, if I wanted, sometimes you say like, God, give me a sign, right? I put out what I want that sign to be moving forward. Please don't knock over my coffee. I also brought coffee with me this morning. I put out that I wanted my sign because I was like, I have to pick something so weird, something that's not like a thing in Ohio. I can't be just like the color red or like a hot dog. Like, I don't know. It had to be something weird. So I was like, Sasquatch or like Yeti, right? I was like, that's my sign. Like, if I see a Sasquatch, if I'm not asking the universe for a sign and I get a Sasquatch, I know that the universe is like communicating with me, guiding me. It's woo woo. That's my thing. So when I saw that one of the stuffies was a Yeti, and I was like having that moment of like my nervous system was calming down as I like stood in Costco petting this stuffed animal, I was like, I have to buy it. And then I was like, I looked at the price and it was only like $12.99. And I was like, oh, that's cheap. I'm getting it. So I put her in the cart and she rode around with me for the rest of the grocery trip. And now she's my pillow and she's wonderful. Hi, Shuggy Boogie. This is Shuggy Boogie. We just had Gotcha Day. Shuggy, she was Christmas gift for our family 4 years ago in 2019. We got her on December 19th of 2019, and she was a little 10-pound poochie. She was so cute with her little chest. She's so soft. She's so chesty. Yes, ma'am. Give me skin? No skin? Oh, yeah, she giving skin. Thank you. And we just celebrated like a little gotcha day the other day. We actually don't know what Sky's gotcha date was, because Sky, she's 10. She was Greg and Jeff's dog before Greg and I moved in together. And so you don't know Jeff, it doesn't matter. I just threw out that name like you're supposed to know who I'm talking about. Anyway, that's irrelevant. So let's get to our talk, you guys. We're talking about faith and spirituality this week. And it's kind of weird for me because I kind of talked about this week in some of my posts, and I talked about this in the blog post that I wrote, that I am the last person who I ever would have thought was going to do like a chat on faith and spirituality, or say being the person who was like, you do need that in your life. No matter, what it is for you, you should find a higher power of your own understanding, right? I have a lot of friends who are very deeply Christian. I respect that. I have friends who are in the like witchy, pagan, like very woo-woo space. I respect that. I actually resonate with a lot of that. I grew up Roman Catholic. I was baptized, confirmed, reconciled Roman Catholic. And I went to Catholic schooling, and that kind of speaks to my journey. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about here today, because I don't want to tell you what to believe. I can only really speak to this from a place of what I believe, what my journey has been, why, and why I think it's important to have faith. Because at the end of the day, your faith is your own, and whatever you decide to believe, if it's like the Christian God, or maybe you're even Jewish or Islamic, or some other like branch of Christianity, like Methodist or Protestant, or maybe you're a Buddhist, like a yogi, it doesn't matter to me. I think at the end of the day, as long as you have a belief and faith in something that's larger than yourself, that is what matters the most in sort of the full circle wellness pie of life and the slice that we're talking about today. So in regards to my own source of faith and kind of where I am and how I got here, like I said, grew up Roman Catholic. I went to a Catholic school, like grade school. I went to Catholic high school. And when I was a kid, most of the kids that went to it was called St. James. Most of the kids that went to St. James, and they were already baptized Catholic as kids because their families were Catholic, right? And my family is not actually like Catholic. My mom is absolutely a believer. My stepdad is an atheist. And I just kind of took on the belief of like God in general. And then when I got to school, it was kind of like that need to fit in, I think. And I wanted to be like the other kids. So I went through the process in second grade of having my first communion, getting baptized in the Catholic Church. And then in fourth grade, we did reconciliation. And then in eighth grade, we were confirmed under the name of a patron saint. And I chose Angela Merici just because she was the patron saint of the high school that I was going to. So, I just needed that moment. I don't know much about Angela Merici. I don't know much about any of that stuff. And it's funny because I literally was taught it, right? Like I had to study it. And then in high school, we had to take classes like Christian awareness, faith and spirituality. We took scripture, where we had to actually study the Bible, which was actually a very interesting class. It was taught by a super devout woman, yet at the same time, we studied the Bible like it was a book and less like it was a holy text, which was a really interesting play on learning about what's in it and the stories, and thinking of them more as like fables than truth, like actual truth. Because I think at the end of the day, and this is just my belief, I think when it comes to stuff like that, because there are so many different religions, I've always thought, well, how do you know which one is right? Like, how do you know that Christianity is right over Islam? How do you know, or maybe Buddhism is right, or maybe, I can't think of another one off the top of my head, like maybe this is right, maybe that's right. How do you know? And that's when I started to question the idea of like, what is religion? Why do we follow it? Is it bullshit? Like, whatever. And in high school around that time, I decided to just reject religion altogether. And I was like, well, I'm an atheist, you guys. I'm agnostic. I was like, I'm an atheist. So I just sort of, and the crowd of friends that I had, we were all very like punk rock. So it was like the cool thing to be a rebel. Again, I think there was a lot of that like need to fit in as an adolescent, and that shaped a lot of who I was as a young person. So I spent that kind of time just questioning and really thinking like, this isn't for me. And then around, I think I was like 17, my very best friend from birth, she was in a youth group at a Methodist church. And I was like, oh my God, I want to go to youth. Like, that sounds fun. So I started going to youth group, and I then considered myself like a born again Christian. I don't know. It was a Methodist church. I loved youth group. I really loved like singing, and like I started to pray again, and I started to experience what I now know to be, this sort of communion with the universe, right? And at the time it was just like I was saying it was God. I was believing in it through the Christian faith, like through the Christian lens, and I was experiencing what people will say are like the miracles of God, right? Like I'd pray for something and something would happen, or I would pray to need something and something would show up in my life that like proved to me that my prayer was being answered. So I considered myself like born again. I wasn't like rebaptized or anything like that. I just joined a church. Of course, youth group only lasts until you're like 18, I think. So I went to college and that didn't last very long. And then of course, you guys, I went to art school where you get a lot of, we'll say, people in the atheist space, people who reject religion, people who are very, I mean, there's a lot of stereotypes about art school kids, and I'll be straight with you. I was there. It's totally true. You get a lot of like weird kids. That's like the sort of congregation of the weird kids, right? And it's like I was one of the weird kids, so I felt very at home there. But I went to art school. I really didn't continue any kind of faith practice. I kind of just rejected the idea that there was anything at all, and I ended up in a very, very, very depressed and anxious space because I had moved away from home for the first time. I was just sort of being like thrust into adulthood, and in no way was I ready to function as an adult. I was 18. I took a year off between high school and college and then went. And I had also just met Greg, who, I thought at the time, and I mean, I guess I was right because we're still together. I was like, this is a very serious relationship. Like, I want to take this seriously. And now I'm away from home and we have to do this long distance and all this stuff. So there was just like a lot going on when I went to college, and faith and spirituality was like the farthest thing from my mind. And in hindsight, I wish maybe I had it at the time, because I think it maybe would have like helped me and anchored my journey and kept me grounded, but that just wasn't my truth at the time. So college, I graduated college, I ended up transferring schools. I came home. I finished art school here, actually. So I was going to art school in Columbus. I came back to Cincinnati, finished my journey. And I was still like throughout this whole time, like still very much, not religious, very like rejecting of religious. I was like, haha, Bible thumpers, like blah, like really kind of rude about it. And then I got my first, so I served through college, and then I got my first like big girl job. Okay. I ended up being a front desk receptionist slash marketing graphic designer at this real estate firm here in Cincinnati. And that was a really dark place for me after a while, because I started to, well, we'll say I had stopped making artwork. I just sort of rejected everything that I had been up until that point in terms of becoming an artist, making my work, following the path of an artist. And then I was just like, yeah, I'm just gonna go get like a regular job. And so I was very much rejecting myself as a person. I think I talked about this, like really trying to like shove a square peg into a round hole. And that eventually, of course, wore on me. I was there for 4 years, and I think by year 1.5, maybe even 2, I was like starting to hit my version of rock bottom. That was when I was like the most depressed, the most anxious. I mean, drinking probably the most, although I will say my tolerance did continue to go up over the years before I decided to lead a sober life and get clean and accept that I was an alcoholic and that I needed to stop drinking. And definitely was like highly abusing substances at the time. I make jokes now about the tolerance that I had for smoking weed, and like we did dabs every night. Like we were just very deeply in substance abuse. And it's like, but when you're 22 and 23, you're like, this isn't substance abuse. Girls just want to have fun. Like, you just think of it as like that party, young 20s party lifestyle, and you just don't see the road that you're going down until you start approaching 30. At least this is what it was for me. I started approaching 30 and I was like, oh, this isn't cute anymore. And there was I always get off on a tangent, you guys. There was a moment for me, like there was actually a kind of a defining moment. We were out for my best friend's birthday, and we went to a winery, and everybody at dinner ordered a whole bottle of wine because, you know, you're at a winery, they'll cork it for you, you can take it home. No one took the wine home. We drank our whole bottles, each of us, at the table. Went to a bar after where I don't know what everybody else did, but I then consumed, I think, 2 more pints, not of wine, but I switched to beers, consumed 2 more pints. Not proud of it, but drove myself home. I live 5 minutes away from the winery, so it's not like crazy, but, and I, you know, it's like, but why, you know, don't justify that, right? Can you get off the shot? You're in the way. You just gonna sit down. I'm telling stories. We're having big talk. You're here for the big talk. She's here for the big talk. Drove myself home and then had more beer and then continued to eat a bunch of food. And I was just kind of like, what has my life become? Like, that's when I started to realize, like, my tolerance is out of control. I was like, this is crazy. And the thing is, I was never this like crazy angry drunk that like caused a lot of problems or like a lot of drama or anything like that. When I would drink, it was more of just this like numbing. Like, it was very much anytime I would drink, whether I was in a social setting or I was at home, it was never just like, oh, I'm gonna have a little bit because dinner. It was always like, I'm gonna drink until I feel it and then just kind of see how far I can get. It was always this matter of like, how much can I drink? And that's when I started to just get honest with myself, like, okay, I need to make a change. So anyway, tangent. Back at the real estate job, I was kind of at the height of that alcoholism and that substance abuse and binge eating, just like putting on weight, always sad. Like, there were days where I would cry so hard at work that I would have to like go find somewhere in the office building to just like hide and cry for a minute and then just like pull myself together and go back to work. And it was not a good situation, like being at that rock bottom. But being at that rock bottom, I think, is what took me to my knees, so to speak. That, right, you know, you pray on your knees, but it's like it brought me to my knees. It got me to a place where I was so done with being that person and numbing my life and just having all of these trauma stories overtake me on a daily basis. And then, of course, little did I know that I was simultaneously struggling with premenstrual dysphoric disorder, because I didn't get that diagnosis until 10 years later, like 22. I didn't learn about that until I was 32, and yet I have had it since I had started my cycle as like a 12, 13-year-old. So there's like all this stuff going on at one time, and I just said, with no belief or faith whatsoever, I just kind of said out into the universe, like, please help me, heal me. There has to be another way. Like, I can't live my life like this. And right around the same time, I talked about it. I think I talked about it last week, or I talked about it the week before. I talked about Work Bigger, finding Work Bigger and Belma, and doing that work with her and working with a coach, working with Coach Kate under her. That was kind of the beginning, like this sort of like inkling of personal development work. That was where I started to say, like, okay, I'm going to reach for that thing and try to get myself out of this sort of like muck that I have like dug myself into, right? And it started with a prayer. And that's when I finally started to think, okay, maybe something. And I didn't anchor that to anything. I didn't anchor that to any specific religion. I didn't anchor that to any kind of like denomination or God specifically, or anything that I was like, I'm going to declare Christianity again, or Catholicism, or Judaism, or Judaism or something. I was just like, okay, maybe there is something out there. So all of that to say, that's kind of where the journey started for me. And it was just the beginning, because after I kind of got through Work Bigger, that's when I started to think, like, okay, maybe this job isn't for me. Maybe I need to get back into my artwork. So I got back into my artwork. I made this piece, I think I talked about it, called Body Heal Thyself. And I accompanied it with a poem. Not going to read it. Maybe I'll come back and read it one day. It's kind of long. I accompanied it with a poem, and it was this sort of begging of my like self. It was And now I have a concept of like what self with a capital S is, and I didn't before, but it was like this begging of myself, body, heal thyself. I knew that I was drinking too much. I knew it was starting to look like alcoholism. I knew I was smoking too much. I knew I was like binge eating and wasn't working out. I wasn't doing anything good for myself. And I was like, please, I need the change. I need to become a better version of myself for myself, or I'm going to, sadly, I'm looking at taking my own life at this point, because I was so depressed and I was just so done feeling that way that I was like, I can't go on like this. And I was just like, one more day. Every day it was just this one more day. Just keep hanging on, just hang on, just hang on. And it was almost like this voice inside of me that said, like, just hang on, hun. Just hang on. You can do this. And all kinds of stuff was going on at the time. I was having like a really tumultuous thing with my mom near the end of that job. I was 26, and we had stopped talking at my own behest because I had decided that I wanted to go on this healing journey, and we were having a lot of drama, and I said, like, I don't need this right now. I have to distance myself in order to start doing this healing work. So I did that, and then I got the next job that I had. It's funny because this kind of like coincides with like my career journey. And that job was in the art space. The boss was fucking nuts. She was a narcissist by all definition of what a narcissist is. And I just like got through that. I was there for a year, and I was starting to do that mental health work. Like I was starting to kind of see a therapist. At the time, the previous boss had actually, he felt so bad for my situation, and I, God bless, like literally bless John. Like, he was an incredible person. Those people really held space for me during a very dark time, and I appreciate beyond anything that they didn't like fire me, because seriously, like I said, I would just be crying on a regular basis. He actually hooked me up with his therapist at the time, paid for a couple of my visits. Like, he really cared about his employees, which was just something I could say about the man. And so I saw that guy. It was okay, but it was that kind of like cognitive behavioral therapy, and I didn't realize at the time that what I really, really needed was the deep healing work that I finally got with my therapist, Sharon, through BetterHelp, the EMDR, the IFS, the meditation. And why I needed that, at this point, I see that it was the beginning of true spiritual practice and having faith in something that like grounds me and holds me. So I got out of that job, got into the next job, and then finally ended up in the job that I have now. It's all good, all well and good. And at that point, my healing journey had started to kind of snowball. I started to really take that more seriously. I was drinking less, but I was still drinking. I finally kind of like started to work out a little bit, trying to fix the food situation, but I would still have like these huge binge eating moments. And then I know we've talked about my therapy journey with BetterHelp. I got into BetterHelp at the behest of what felt like the universe, seriously. So I've talked about a little bit when I kind of said, I need this help. Things started to just kind of come my way. It was like, at first, my aunt gave me this book. It was actually Girl Wash Your Face by Rachel Hollis. And that was kind of my first look at like real personal development. Because like I like to say, she's really top of the game in the personal development field. And I read that book and I started to believe that like, oh, I can do this work. Like, I can do this work on myself. I don't have to trap myself in the stories that I've been telling myself about myself. I can rewrite the story. And that book led me to just pick up another book. I started to listen to Rachel's podcast. Rachel's podcast led me to other podcasts. I started listening to Gabby Bernstein. And when I started listening to Gabby Bernstein, who is like a spiritual teacher, a spiritual writer, I was like, holy shit, like this is really resonating with me, this work that she's talking about. And she used terms like the universe and spirit. Like, there was no denomination attached to the spirituality that she was talking about. And that resonated with me because up until that point, I was still very much rejecting the idea of religion. And today, I still don't identify with a religion. And the reason for that for me is because I think that religion, any religion, views God as something separate. It's like, here's God and here's me, and God tells me what to do. And it's this very like separate relationship. But I believe that separation is a huge illusion. I think that God is us, that we are all a piece of this massive whole that is the idea of like God, universe, source, spirit. So that brings me to a quote. Let me go ahead and get this up for you guys. So I was reading recently The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, and very, very near the end of the book, he starts talking about faith, and I was like, oh, okay. And he comes in with this quote, and I was like, holy shit, that very much sums up what I believe at this point. And he writes, then a special kind of awareness settled into me, a sure knowledge that seemed so obvious I wondered why I hadn't thought of it before. I am made of the same stuff as everything else. The trees, the sky, the earth beneath me. We are all made of the same thing, and it is all one thing. Everything is connected to everything else. Later in life, I came across a stunning passage from the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, which spoke directly to me across from first century Rome. I am a part of the whole, all of which is governed by nature. I am intimately related to all the parts which are of the same kind as myself. And I was just like, oh my God. Like, I was like, okay, someone just like verbalized what I had been sort of like believing as my truth since I started working with my therapist. And what kind of led me there in terms of like the therapeutic work was doing meditative work. I started doing meditative work. And when you're doing meditative work, you really just get this like clearness and this sort of like expansiveness, especially if you're closing your eyes and you're just sort of like feeling into the space that you exist in. And it started to give me this idea that like I'm just part of something larger, and there is something vastly larger than me. I started feeling and sort of hearing guidance. And I'm like, is that the universe? Is it guides? Is it spirits? Is it angels? Is it all of it? And I was like, I think it's all the same thing. And when I can go inward, I tap into that. And that's why I like that idea that all of which is governed by nature, that nature sort of is that whole universe concept, the all that is this oneness. Because if you think about it, the cycles of nature, the sort of governance of nature, the physics of nature is the defining law, so to speak, of our existence. And so I think that is divine, and as a part of it, we are all divine. And there's a lot of that in like yoga, Sanskrit understanding, this sort of like the divine in me recognizes the divine in you, which I believe is what namaste means. That we're all part of the divine, that God isn't here, it's here. And you can access it anytime. And just sort of like a lot of Christian text explains, it's this source of love, this source of calm, this source of confidence, this self energy, this God energy that is untouchable, that you can always access inside of you. So I now interchangeably use terms like God, universe, spirit, source, angels, guides. Like all of it is kind of the same, and it's all very real to me. And I'll just use those terms interchangeably. I use the term God often because I think that resonates with a lot of people. A lot of people are kind of in the Christian faith. And if I, use that terminology, I think we can kind of like hit a middle ground and like understand that, you might believe this in a different way, but I believe that we are talking about the same thing. And I still respect your beliefs and where you're coming from. This is just, where I'm coming from. So I also had another quote, and still from The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. He says, we eventually become aware of our unity within the whole because it is inescapable. The awareness is wired into us because we are wired into the universe. We can try with all our might to pretend we are separate from the rest of the universe, but one way or another, it will catch up to us and welcome us back into its embrace. And that is exactly what my faith journey has been. Catching up to that idea and having it welcome me back into its embrace, that I am just a part of this all, and that all is right within me, and I'm like a drop in the ocean, but the ocean is a drop in me, like the whole oneness of it all, right? And I practice my faith and spirituality and tapping into that through meditation. IFS meditation is more of a therapeutic modality, but I think it's also still very spiritual. But sort of like clearing your mind meditation for me is very much like a spiritual practice. Creating artwork is a spiritual practice for me. I let the universe sort of like create through me. I view myself as the vessel for the creative work, and I just like let things come very intuitively. I will ask for signs, guys. Sasquatch, Yeti, like, this is like, I'm looking for the signs. I'll ask for signs. I look for them everywhere. If I see an angel number or a specific color or a song comes on out of nowhere, and I'm kind of like, oh, I haven't heard that song in a really long time, I think, oh, what is what is the universe trying to communicate to me? Because I think God, universe, spirit, source, it's trying to communicate to us at all times and put us on our path that is for our highest good and the highest good of the all. Again, that's just where I'm coming from with it. That's just my belief. Ella is barking. I hope that you don't hear that. She's downstairs, so hopefully it's far enough away. It's probably packages getting delivered. We still have a couple things coming for Christmas. Anyway, universe is probably my favorite word for God, but I think God is probably the second most used word that I like to use in my daily language. Because again, I believe that sort of like nature, universe, like this source of creation, like that is God, like that we're all part of that divine, right? And this is why I like to celebrate the cycles of nature, and that dates back to like pagan, very sort of, people say witchy, but like pagan beliefs of celebrating what's called the Celtic Wheel of the Year. And it's not the seasonal cycles that are presented by the Gregorian calendar, but it's its own calendar of, last night actually was the winter solstice. So the longest night of the year, shortest day of the year, that celebration of darkness, this honoring of being in the dead of winter. As the wheel turns, the next sort of holiday that we will celebrate is called Imbolc, and that is the equal point. It's technically the beginning of spring. It's when the light starts to come back, where the days start to like actually get longer. That kind of turns, and then you have Litha, you have Lunessa, you have Mabon, Samhain, all of these turns of the wheel that sort of represent the summer solstice, the winter solstice, the autumnal equinox, the spring equinox, and then those cross holidays in between that actually mark the beginning of the seasons. And our ancestors used to live by this, right? Because we didn't have light. They had to harvest and grow food, live by the governance of nature. So it was like, it was sort of this all-defining law. And I think in thinking of nature as something as divine, it's just another spiritual practice and sort of like a ritual that I like to have. Again, I kind of like some of the witchy, woo-woo, pagan stuff. I think that a lot of stuff like herbalism, using the earth as medicine, thinking of food as medicine, that really resonates with me, and it becomes this very spiritual thing. Yesterday I made like a winter tea with cinnamon and rosemary and some orange and like a bunch of different ingredients. I posted it to my Instagram if you want to see it. And that was sort of like this magical moment of honoring the winter solstice and this moment of like all of these natural ingredients coming together. And then I let it steep for a while and I put it in the fridge, and it's a tea, but it's like it became this magical moment of like breath and spiritual practice. And that's just me. That's just what I like. And then I have another quote for you guys. So this is from The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, which I know I've talked about in a previous newsletter. This was before I kind of got a stronger idea of how I wanted to do the themes of the week. Anyway, Julia Cameron, she writes, "We meditate to discover our own identity, our right place in the scheme of the universe. Through meditation, we acquire and eventually acknowledge our connection to an inner power source that has the ability to transform our outer world." And that's what I believe is like God, the source of love, that source of the universe, that source of all that's within us. And that's why I like to meditate as a spiritual practice. It allows me to tap into that, connect to that, hear guidance from my spirits and my guides. I like to there's a prayer that actually Gabby Bernstein had in her book Happy Days that I talk about, and it's this was something I repeated a lot at the beginning of my health journey, and it's thank you, universe, for guiding me on this path to becoming new. I honor the vision of how I want to feel. I am open to receiving your guidance always. And actually, I think it was now, but I always used to say always. It's like, I'm open to receiving your guidance always. So it's this like idea that you pray in thanks for the things that you need, and you release expectation of what's coming to you, but then act in certainty that it is coming, and believing that something is holding you, something is guiding you, and looking for those signs, reaching for it, people that you encounter, books that come into your like sphere out of nowhere, podcast episodes, things like that. I think that's all divine guidance, and I think we have to just be in this like presence and in this awareness to reach for it. And whether you believe that's coming from like a Christian God or some other faith, I think it's all the same. And I think when you're looking for that guidance, it's definitely going to come to you. Ella has returned. And then she also wrote, as I listen to the creator within, I am led. And I think that speaks heavily to looking for that source of God within you and not outside of yourself. I also wrote from No Bad Parts. And this No Bad Parts is the book about IFS meditation. And again, still going to come back. We're going to talk about that. I'm trying to structure that conversation because I, as you know, tend to get on a lot of tangents. And I think that's one of those conversations where I don't need to get on a tangent. I'm working on doing this a little better. We're now approaching 40 minutes. So we're at like full podcast length here. So I'm actually pretty confident that I could turn this into a podcast. We'll see. Richard Schwartz writes in No Bad Parts, in the process of becoming more and more familiar with IFS, why is my handwriting poor? A rich sense of spirituality emerged. I saw that this self-energy, this dialogue with all of the other egoic parts, is my soul. This allowed me to have a direct, physical, felt sense of God, love, spirit, compassion within me. And then he goes on to explain the 8 C's of self-energy, which are creativity, courage, curiosity, connectedness, compassion, clarity, calm, and confidence. That when you're feeling those things and when you're in the energy of those things, you're connected to that source of love within you. And that's what I've got for you there. So let's wrap today with a card pull. Why do I pull cards, you guys? 1, it's a little bit of fun. 2, I think that because the energies, the all is always trying to communicate with us, that using something like a card deck, whether it's tarot or we're going to pull from my Universe Has Your Back deck, which is sort of like an affirmation deck, that if the universe is trying to communicate to you and you're actively using something as a conduit for that communication, something like pulling cards, tarot, listening to music, meditation, that you are going to get answered quite directly. I have been using tarot as a way to communicate with God for a while, and it never ceases to amaze me the cards that you pull out of a very thick deck, and the way that it comes to you is like, damn, that's exactly what I needed to hear. So I pulled this card today, calling upon the universe to tell us exactly what we as a community need to hear. Wow. This is actually one of the cards that I pulled the other night, and I'm like, wow. Because again, very large deck. And I just shuffled it a couple times. The card reads, when I'm connected to my joyful presence, I attract support from the universe. Yes, you guys, yes. Okay. We'll wrap our conversation there. We're approaching 40 minutes, like I said. Yida sends you love. I send you love. Ella sends you love. She has been kind of in and out. And if you have anything to share, if you have any questions, if you want to weigh in on what you believe, the journal prompt this week was just to sit down and think about that. Get clear with yourself. Whatever it is, if it's Christian faith, if it's Jewish faith, if it's Buddhism, maybe you're a yogi, maybe you're into the pagan thing, like I'm a little into the pagan thing. whatever it is, get clear on what you believe and then decide how you want to start incorporating a spiritual practice into your life. Because I think when you have that as a piece of the full circle wellness pie, it grounds you, it anchors you. That faith that I hold reminds me that no matter what happens on this journey, it's happening for a reason. Even if it's bad, my faith is strong enough that I'm like, no, that was supposed to happen. This is happening for me, not to me. And I'm looking for that message. And I think it really flips the script for you. It changes your mindset on how you're living your life, the things that are coming into your life, the things that are happening. And particularly if a lot of the same shit keeps happening, that's a universal assignment. That's the universe trying to teach you a lesson that you're not getting yet because it keeps happening. Stop yourself. Ask, get into that faith, get into that spirituality and say, okay, why does this keep happening? Why do I keep attracting this? What is the message here that I am meant to receive? What is the lesson I'm meant to learn? Oh my God, I could go on another tangent, but I'm already at 40 minutes because I just was reading again in The Universe Has Your Back. So this is the companion deck. I was reading the book, The Universe Has Your Back by Gabby Bernstein. Again, I love her as a spiritual guide. She is doing the high work, you guys. I love her books. She's done a lot of books. She's done a lot of work. She has a podcast. It's just really great work. And if you're interested in that kind of vibe, check her out because I think she's the real deal. She was talking about those universal assignments, and I kept thinking, like, what's something that's coming up for me? And a thing that keeps coming up for me is like, most of my jobs, I've always gotten to this point where I start to really burn out. And I think it's easy for anybody to burn out, but it's more of this sense of like, I don't belong anymore. And I keep thinking, like, what's the lesson here? And I was like, ooh, like I was starting to do some deep work there. And again, I'm not going to get out on a tangent because that also gets into some deep work as to why I still have some of the vices I have, which while I don't drink and smoke anymore, I definitely still, I'll binge watch TV. I'll get on like a little shopping tangent and I like recognize that as something in myself that's like unhealed. So anyway, again, the healing journey is never over. There's always something to heal. There's always something to work on. And I think if you want to do that work, it might feel and sound exhausting, but it is, I think, always worth it in the end. So that's what I've got for you guys today. Happy Friday. Happy holidays. I'll be back again today. I'll share a few things. I've got a few things that I wanted to share with you guys. It's just been a busy week. So I've got just a couple of nuggets that I'm going to throw into the discussion in the group, and leave some comments. Definitely open up the conversation. Let me know what you think. And wait, Monday is Christmas. I might just be back with like just a little Christmas message for you guys, but I'll be back on Tuesday then with our newsletter, and we'll be continuing the conversation for the topic that I have planned for next week, which I am excited about. So I won't tell you guys what that is. I'll just leave it hanging. And that's it. You guys have a wonderful weekend and a super happy holiday, whatever you celebrate, or if you celebrate Christmas, I don't know. Merry Christmas. Enjoy. I'll see you guys later. Love you.